Hi, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Anya Chirkova. I directed Baba and produced Bump. Both of my shorts premiered at Sundance 2023-2022. Yep.
Okay. My name's Andrea, and I mostly do genre films. I've done 3 shorts so far. There's Srikandi, a kind of fantasy drama, and then Shallots and Garlic is a body horror. And my latest one, Sawo Matang, is sci-fi romance. And yeah, I'll go with that.
Cool. My name is Rebeccah Love. I'm a disabled filmmaker who has directed 8 shorts, and I just finished my first feature-length film. My films have played through CBC, the TIFF website, VIF, FNC, Kingston Film Festival, and other places.
Oh yeah. I feel like I'm like, dang, how do I follow all these? I'm Rebeca Ortiz. I'm a producer, director, Abuela is like my first short film that I've directed and wrote, but a lot of people know me for my producing work. I would say Pick is probably the most well-known. It won the Canadian Screen Award for the best short back in 2020. So that was a cool thing. Aside from that, yeah, CBC Gem is the home of most of the short films that I've done. And yeah, love to produce, love to collaborate. And I like to sing too.
My name is Maz. I directed a film called Bump. I also wrote Baba. They both premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. I mainly work with Anya. I guess I act sometimes when it's needed. I also edited Sao.
That's true.
Yeah, so I worked with both of you guys. Proud of both projects. I don't know. That's it.
What doesn't it do? Dang.
All right, cool. So
we have some questions in the middle.
Some questions. I have a question like before we dive into these. What made you want to become a filmmaker?
oof.
That's tough. Yeah, I don't know.
Do you have an answer to go?
Maybe. Like I know I've always liked arts, and I've always been like, I've had an affinity towards arts. So I guess it's mostly like just finding the medium of what I want to say or how I want to say it. So I started off doing murals in high school and then competed with murals. But then there was like a slow season for murals, but I still needed a reason to like cut class and get out of class. So I think our guidance counselor suggested for us to do a short film competition, and we didn't really know how to do it. So, but it's better than math class. So we just gave it a shot. And I think that for that competition specifically, we got into like top 10. And then, they flew us over for a festival. And then after that, it just, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker.
Yeah, no. So started young.
Yeah, I guess so. 16?
16, yeah.
15?
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. I love that. I feel like it was around 16 that I did like the civics and careers class you have to take, and it's like, if anyone's seen Lizzie McGuire, Miranda does like they do the careers test, and it's like, what career is right for you? And I got cinematographer, and I was like, oh my god, you could do film for a job.
That's so specific.
Yeah,
It was
very
really
specific.
Not just like in film.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oops.
Siri's like, what did you have to say?
She was like, I'm a filmmaker too.
Listen to me,
by
everyone.
her own right.
Yeah, exactly.
She's working on her own project too. So I got that, and then kind of from there, it was like it clicked. I used to always like love running around with my dad's old video camera. Any project that was like, you can make a video or do an essay. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's a video. And so I was always just like making stuff with my best friend, YouTube videos, and then when I got that career test answer, I was like, okay, let's this
right
is
there.
meant to be. Yeah.
Cool.
It told me.
So?
For me, I like you said, I always been around arts. Like I graduated art school and always kind of been. A lot of my friends are fine artists, but I've never saw myself in arts. And then kind of coming to closer to graduating high school, I was considering to go to do theater behind the scenes, just because I didn't want to go to like fine art school, like painting and stuff, because I didn't really see myself being there, but I didn't see myself doing any like corporate, whatever that means, job either. So, my dad wasn't really thrilled about it. So instead of theater, he kind of directed me to film. And I guess it worked out because I really loved film in film school. But now realizing, going back to my mindset when I started film school, I had no idea what film really is, if that makes sense. Like how much work, how much people it involves, and like what I want to do, kind of. I just went because I liked the art of it. And as I was at school, I learned the trade. And I liked it ever since.
Awesome.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, I've always like loved watching movies. I guess like since I was like really young, I remember watching like Series of Unfortunate Events, and that was like the movie. And then like just watching that Jim Carrey performance, like I was always just like this is, they're having so much fun. Like this seems like insane. Like, and just seeing the reaction that I got from my family, like my dad would be laughing, my mom would be like, "Oh my god!" Like
that's funny. It's the first movie I saw on a big screen.
It's truly a bit of a masterpiece. That's like a Heath Ledger level of like performance, that Jim Carrey performance. I really like it. It's like Dark Knight level for me.
I love Jim Carrey.
I love that. He should have got nominated or something for that performance. But it's really good. And watching that, I remember, and then I guess as a kid, you just start watching and you're like, oh, if you want to be in movies, you have to be an actor, because that's the first thing that you see are actors. You don't really get the sense of people behind the camera. So I kind of always, like, I enjoyed acting, I guess. Like, it was something that was always interesting because that was the first thing that I ever saw, which is funny because I guess I'm in our movies.
I guess.
But yeah, I guess that was a spark of seeing that kind of thing, and then also being like, oh, I can write my own stories. I don't have to just be in other people's things, or like I can work on my own stories and tell stories that are important to me. Or like, yeah, I guess that was kind of the reason of why I wanted to be a filmmaker. It's like I feel like if it was any other medium, like a painting doesn't really have like the audio quality, and then a song doesn't really have the visual, and then you take and I think I'm not saying it's like superior or whatever, but I really like that you can take both of those things, like visual and audio, and just put those things together. Like it just becomes a really interesting way to tell a story is through these two really strong ways. So yeah, I just became interested in that, and then started editing, and really fell in love with kind of like all aspects of filmmaking as well.
It's interesting. I just heard you say, like, you used the word fun, that filmmaking is fun. And Rebeccah also said, like, I can't believe this is a job. Like, I think it's one of the things that's so special about film is it's so different from any other industry. Like, to be able to be so creative and make use of your imagination that you can't do if you're working some kind of like corporate job, if you're like in an office, and like you can't make use of the same creative faculties. So it's just interesting picking up on this, like the common threads, like what attracted us to this world. Like for me, I also did a lot of theater. I came up from like different, I loved painting and I loved doing theater and I loved, but for me, I think I can connect with a lot of what you're saying just in terms of like what's drawing us into this world. It's different. It's sort of magical. There's so many different ways to like interact with the world, like as an actor, as an editor, as a director, as a producer. In my own story, like I got really, really sick when I was 18 with bipolar disorder. And for me, it was like filmmaking became an escape. It was like a place to go to escape my own pain and to play around with my pain and to play around with some of the more difficult parts of my life that were confusing to me, and I didn't know how to like make sense of them. But suddenly in this world of filmmaking, I could craft a narrative out of my pain. I could talk to other people and collaborate with other people about my pain, and I wonder, it's a place where we can make sense of our realities. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna put my phone outside.
No worries. That's so funny.
I like how it's like giving you directions.
Where?
It'd be funny if it was still in your pocket. That'd be hilarious.
But yeah, so I was just saying, it's like filmmaking is a world to escape into. It's a world to make sense of the confusing parts of us, or the parts of our identity that we want to dive into, or we want to think about more. I don't know. Like, so, yeah, I wonder, like, in each of your films, like, what are some of the big ideas that you're trying to like make sense of through your narrative, through the worlds that you're creating?
Well, I found that in general, no matter what you do, whether you write, direct, produce. I guess it all depends how much you're involved in the creative process in that case. But I find that aside just, like you said, trying to express whatever you feel through your work, I discover a lot about myself as I'm doing the work. So it's kind of the work itself becomes cathartic. Even originally, you might not put your mind into that through that direction in a way, because I don't. As for now, I don't really write I don't really write myself. The work that I've directed recently was written by Maz. But what I found is, even though I connected with the story, but I started connecting to it more and more as we were approaching more to the production itself and in the post, because I discovered almost like another version of myself within the story, if that makes sense. And I would imagine now kind of trying to go back into writing and doing the same thing on the page. That's just really interesting that aside, like you said, trying to, I guess, convey certain emotions or trying to connect with whatever, either trauma or just experience that you had in your past, I find it interesting to discover new stuff as you work. Like new emotions. Like recently I had a pretty existential trip home, and that's kind of what inspired my story or whatever. But like as I go through it, I discovered more and more within myself. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think each of the films that we all shared are digging at some part of our cultural identity or our the ideas that we're sort of wrestling with on a day-to-day. Like, I'm really curious about like all of your films. Andrea, I have a question for you. Like, in your film, I see a lot of attention to like the body and like with the egg. Is it an egg? The egg and the discussions over dinner about bodies. And I'm like curious what's going through your mind when you're approaching these like notions of the body in your work.
Well, I guess before we get into that, let's get something clear. So for my work, I'm gonna say there's always been two purposes. One is very selfish. One is for me. Like for me, like my films are my way of therapy. Like, because I used to joke with my dad, you know, like I don't want to go to therapy. Like it's so expensive. I'll just make a film, and then I make a film. It's like it's more expensive. Like what am I doing?
Therapy's easier.
Yeah, should have went to therapy. But then like no, but and there's been a lot of times where I was like writing the script, and I'm a pretty avoidant person. Like I don't really try to process my feelings. I'm more of like keep myself busy and distract myself from the emotions I'm trying to avoid. But having to write my script and having to like do a grant deadline or whatever, I'm forced to like revise my script, and during that I'm also forced to like process my own emotions. So that said, and this is like in parallel to another purpose that I'm trying to do with my filmmaking, but that's another conversation. But that said, like with the body, it's that one was very much inspired by my own experiences and the way I was growing up, and the way that I guess my family still has this notion, or like maybe Asians have this notion of what body standards are, and what counts as beautiful. And yeah, it was mostly my experience during the pandemic and what I was dealing with at the time. Like I think during the pandemic I gained like 10 kilos, I want to say, and then like went through like like an eating disorder, and then that inspired the film, and then a lot of things that my grandmother said or like my family said, and then they were just like catalysts. But it's really a colonized mindset. Like I'm realizing like I also have a colonized mindset of like what beauty standards are, and yeah, it's very Eurocentric, like at least for Indonesia. So yeah, but it's something that I'm trying to talk about too in my films. So
I was very sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm does that answer the question?
The approach of it I thought was really interesting, that you picked like almost like a horror film like aesthetic to kind of go through. I was curious seeing it again. Like my question is like the split screen, was that in the script?
Oh, at the very beginning, yeah.
That was that you wrote that into the script.
Interesting. I really liked that. I was just curious what was
what was the
everyone
mindset?
was asking about that.
I'm sure I've asked you in the past.
I think you have, but like, do you want me to answer the horror first or the split screen first?
Both. Yeah, both.
Okay. Why horror? Because it was so horrific. Well, like for me, like, well, no. It was horrific, but I actually got hives. I got hives, and then 3 days after, my mom got hives.
Wow.
And then so we were like comparing stuff. And then to try to find similarities, like if we were allergic to something, like a food, or like if we changed detergent and stuff like that. But turns out after we couldn't find any similarities. But then like my mom was like, "Oh, I just came back from like your grandmother, like her mother-in-law," and I was like, "Oh, I just had a call with her too. Like maybe that's it. Maybe that's why we're allergic. Maybe that's why we're having hives, because like we're allergic to like my grandmother." And that was like just the first joke. And then I just told my producer, I was like, listen, what if we do a body horror of like someone who gets hives because they're allergic to their family? And then like
That's a
That's a great,
Wow.
great concept.
and then he just like
That's
rolled
the
his
tagline
eyes.
of the movie.
Just, like,
Allergic
rolled-
to your family.
Allergic to your family.
rolled his eyes, but then I was like, no. And then, but after that, I think everything just started making sense. Like for it to be a
Yeah.
body horror, especially
It definitely
about
does.
like your body issues. And then I was like going through that weight gain and weight loss too. Like, so that was natural. Why the split screen is because essentially it's a story about two sisters, right? Like that's why it's called Shallots and Garlic, because it's stealing of an Indonesian folklore called Shallots and Garlic about two sisters that are very polar opposites. And while I was like doing research and writing and developing the script, I was reading like a book about the psychology of sisters, and they were saying like sisters are like one soul but two bodies. So that's kind of where I got the idea of like, oh, I want them to each have their own worlds because they're all so different. Like Noor has their own world and Karina has their own world. So in the beginning, I want them to like have their own bubble. But then the more you get into the story and then the more they have like the emotional journey and the character arc, their worlds like intertwine. So that's why like after that, like after the first act or whatever, all of their close-ups are clean because it's technically their own world. And then like slowly like during the fight or during the dinner scene, like their close-ups start getting dirty. And then when this bigger sister is like consoling her like in the bedroom, like that's the first time we see them in a two-shot.
Yeah.
So that's like the first time they're trying to like
Visually
actually,
come together,
they actually start to understand each other. So
That fight scene was
awesome.
incredible.
Yeah.
I was like,
Dude, I wish I had edited that.
when they go over the table
you
and over
know
the
me then.
food and
you
like,
can edit my next one.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah, the fight scene. Oh my god, that
resets. I was like, how do you reset this?
She jumps over the
jumps
table.
over the
She jumps
table.
over the
It's
table.
like-
I was
That
like,
was
I
insane.
love that you showed that she goes over. Like you didn't do any tricks or anything.
Yeah, no,
But
she
goes-
had to.
And then there's like food on it, and then she goes over and she starts biting her, and the camera like really gets in there. It's like it almost like it's so uncomfortable. I love that.
I would also say the audio, just like the sound design, like the crunch, the sounds were just very like evident throughout that I think were key.
Yeah, the fight almost didn't happen, but we also didn't reset. That was a one take.
There's a one take.
wow.
I was wondering because I was like,
Only-
how do you?
We could only do one take. There's no way we would have reset that table.
Yeah.
No money,
Yeah.
no time.
Yeah.
Like
That's true.
like no, it's one. But we did a stunt rehearsal before the shoot, and of course, actors. My actor, the day before the stunt rehearsal, like she went skateboarding the day before and she injured her leg. And then she was like, Andrea, I don't know if I can do the fight. And I was like, oh,
No.
Just do it.
And I was like, fuck.
Well, she pulled it off. You all
And then-
pulled it off.
But then like our like stunt coach was like, no, she can still do this in a way that's safe and like doesn't bother her like at all. So like we did the rehearsal and then I was like, okay, are you comfortable with this? Like, yeah, actually this is not bad. So like he choreographed it in a way that like
Nice.
it's props to him. He choreographed it in a way that was like
awesome.
It was very elegant.
super like good for her leg. Like she didn't have to put
Yeah.
any pressure on it.
It doesn't look
And
like
then-
she has a limp or nothing like that. So cool.
On the topic of fight scenes, so you have the fight scene in your film, and then in Baba, there's a moment of like very intense conflict. I'm not sure if you'd call it like a fight, but when he's sort
A
of
13-minute fight.
it's like, well, it's like, you know, when he's in the hall and he gets really aggressive,
yeah,
you know, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
a question for all three of you is like, how do you emotionally prepare your actors for scenes of that intensity? And like, so you said you worked with a fight, like a stunt choreographer. Did you guys work with anyone to like prepare?
No, we had no money for that.
We rehearse a lot.
Yeah.
So we essentially, Baba has been rehearsed kind of like a play
For like 2 months.
for many weeks ahead of
Okay.
time.
No, more than that.
But that particular scene, funny enough, nothing that made the cut was in the script. None of the
that was
dialogue
improv. What he
made-
did,
yeah.
so I know that guy. He's he was a guy that went to my high school, and I just called him.
It's
And
terrifying.
he used to bully me in high school.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Yeah.
The aggression.
Yeah,
It was so.
but he's such a sweet guy though.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah, he's
Sina,
nice
I
now.
love you.
No, he's nice.
No,
He's
no,
very
no,
nice,
no. But like
yeah.
he used to like just shove me in a locker. Like it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
Typical bully.
And then
Yeah.
and then yeah, I just called him. I don't know. I just had a feeling that he could do it.
Yeah.
He had acted in something before, but it was very different. It was very. But I just had a feeling that he could do it. But I wrote dialogue for that scene. And then we did a lot of rehearsals. Like we rehearsed it like
and
crazy
he kind
in
of did
my apartment.
go into that route during the rehearsal.
and it
but-
wasn't good.
But it's just like, it wasn't fully there. So we're like, oh, maybe not. But then when we actually on the day started rolling, I guess he went 100%.
he found
was
something in the rehearsals.
terrifying.
He
Yeah.
found something in the rehearsals too that was really interesting. That he just became really like animalistic. And him and I kind of like we decided, I'm like, okay, this is you're assaulting me basically. Like you need to find a way to just be absolutely intimidating. Your goal is to steal this painting. Like what are you gonna do to take it from me? So we just I don't know. Yeah, we did a lot of.
But regarding
rehearsals.
preparation, I don't think there was any like particularly emotional preparation for that scene. But there is another scene where Maz's character kind of shouts at his father and like cries afterwards. I would say that one, because even though it's not physical, but it's more emotional. That really like you went out, Maren, my co-director, really like talked to him, and they kind of went into like deep.
We really took the
dark
time to do that
spot
right.
in a
We
way.
really because I think
Yeah.
on set you really don't have the time to do that right. We literally spent a day. Just on that scene, like we were just like,
You
and
have to, yeah.
and the thing is, I'm not an actor, so I can't do pickups. Like I can't pick up a scene, and so on Bubba as well. Like I mean, everybody was non-actors. The dad, it was his first time on screen.
Wow.
The landlord's a real landlord. Like
He's like an actual
never acted. Like,
landlord,
he's not an actor. Sina's from my high school, and I've never done anything. And so we would do like incredibly long takes, which was really helpful that you guys let us do like 10-minute long takes where we wouldn't break. Like sometimes, like because I was editing it too, sometimes like not all of it's usable, but because like it helps you really get into that build up. Especially with Baba, there's like a scene where I cry. There's a scene where the dad cries, and doing those incredibly long takes was really helpful for
But
us
I
to
also
kinda
find
get
like
into
in
it.
the edit, sorry to interrupt, like you can't really build emotion that high if you're talking about like about to break and you're doing a pickup or you're starting the scene in the middle. You can see it's really not like in the cutting room. It doesn't cut well together because emotions don't match.
Doesn't match exactly.
Doesn't
and
match.
then I think the biggest to also go to the fight scene. I mean, we had a slap that was real at the end, and that was did that 7 times. It was a lot. It was really like Amir took a fucking beating.
It looked good though.
Well, it was real. I hope it looked good.
It
It was
looked really good.
It was
That
and,
makes
and
sense.
he took such I mean everyone took a beating on that film. I think we were very like there was the overlapping dialogue was excruciating. I had to go in and out of different languages, which was just really hard to kind of do, and we were also improvising at the same time. There was a lot of improv, and
Yeah.
it was just kind of like everybody brought their A game. Like I don't think we could have done this if we didn't have that particular cast. Like they brought 100%, because like we also don't want to do the thing too where like we would film my scenes and then film somebody reacting. Everybody was there on set. Like when one person would be reacting to another person, like the dad would be reacting to the landlord, the guy who's stealing the painting is there, and we kind of, and that honestly made the energy a lot different.
You can
right?
see in the film
You
there's
feel
an
it.
urgency, and there's a choreography, the blocking. It's like a ballet. It's like a dance. Like and that includes the cinematographer. And in a film like this, I would actually consider the cinematographer a player, like an actor.
No, it's
in
very true,
Because
yeah.
the way it all the way it moves is so it creates an urgency. I was uncomfortable watching it, and I think that's exactly the feeling that you're trying to push across, is like how anxiety provoking this scenario is.
Yeah.
So in terms of like themes, like what would you say are the greater ideas that you're exploring in your piece? Like what is the thesis, or what are you trying to communicate through this film?
Specifically in Baba.
In Baba, yeah.
I would say for me, from a directing standpoint, it was particularly about inability to communicate, because as an immigrant myself, and different language, different culture, I really connected in that regard with father and son, essentially their inability to communicate through the language, but also because of that gap in the age. But I think from you as a writer, it's possible.
Well, it's about like for me, it's about like failed parenting in a way, and kind of like this false sense of masculinity that the father tries to put on the son. Because like, I mean, a lot of people, like when we screened the film at Sundance, they were like, "Oh my god, the son escaped, like what a," and I'm like, not really. The son had to like resort to violence. You had to slap him. You know what I mean? Like it's not. It's interesting that a lot of people saw it as a kind of like the son breaking away and the slap being a kind of like cathartic moment. I mean, it is for the most part, but if you watch the film, the son's actually, I guess I've seen it too many times, so this is my kind of interpretation, right? And any interpretation is valid. The son progressively starts to kind of be like the dad. Watching it is kind of sad. I mean, like I don't think it's a happy, like a happy ending necessarily. I mean, like for the son, I mean, like he does leave, but at the same time, he just had to resort to violence to kind of get out of it. And I think similarly to Bump as well, like that one is more comedic, I would say. I think both films kind of deal with this, I guess, like false sense of masculinity. Like they're both like, in Bump, it's just these two guys who can't let this go. Like they both want to be the bigger dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're both just like resorting to such ridiculous things that it just showed they're trying to be strong, similarly to the father, but it's just a lot of kind of like weakness instead. And I think that's what's festering like in those two films. And I think for our films, we're kind of just showing people who I guess are trying to save face, they're trying to be big, but it results in just deep insecurity.
And kind of going back into what you were saying, how because of what you went through, film kind of became a medium for you to share your story. And it was interesting, at Sundance, some people came up to us after the screening and they're like, to you particularly, like, oh, that was my relationship with my father. Oh, it was like, it was really interesting to see interaction similarly to the one that I had with my parents. So I'm not saying that watching my movie, they had this cathartic experience, but they connected on some sort of personal level. So that was very, nice. That's kind of what I want from the screening, right? So it was very nice to see that people can connect.
But also with the themes too, I think particularly for Baba, I think there hasn't been a lot of films like about Iranian men that are kind of like that. Like I feel like that's also kind of the reason why it was like an important story for me to write and to act in as well. Like I feel that like Iranian films and filmmakers, I think they try to show Iranians being very proper. And it is true, like we are like that, like in gatherings, but behind closed doors, there are scenes like that. I mean, the guy who played the dad, he's like, I know who this guy is. A lot of actors turned down that role.
They had really hard time casting that role because nobody wanted to, swear on screen or look
They're
bad.
very, Iranian men are very conservative. Right. They really didn't want to do that. And they're like, oh, this guy is just horrible. And Amir was the only one that really found any kind of humanity. I mean, you can still, like the way he plays it, you can still kind of feel his desperation because at the end of the day, he's an immigrant who's struggling. Yeah. But it's interesting seeing people like gasp. We really never thought people would have that kind of reaction of like when we saw it at Sundance or other festivals and stuff like that. Seeing people's reaction, it was, and that's the interesting thing about filmmaking. You never know where people are gonna laugh. You never know where people.
Oh my god!
How did you find the experience of just viewing your movie on the big screen with the audience?
Like, what's the reaction like for either of you guys?
Go ahead.
Oh my goodness. The first time I think Awella played in a screen, because I released it during COVID. I don't know about you guys, but it was like awesome to see it. People react. I don't know. My film's very quiet and very slow in comparison. I feel like a lot of these films are like fast paced and there's a lot of talking and dialogue, where my film is like totally opposite of that, which is funny because I'm also the opposite of that when I talk. It's like, but it was really interesting because I had someone come up to me after the screening, kind of what you're talking about, of just connecting with people. I think that's what I really love about film, is people can see themselves in your work. The same way, like kind of like you selfishly, you're like, this is my story. I want to tell it. I'm trying to figure something out about myself, or kind of go back into memories and understand specifically in my film, like thinking about an experience with family members from a young age and how I couldn't speak Spanish at the time, and I don't know what success means to my family and all that. But in terms of having that conversation where someone came up to me after and she started crying and she's like, this reminded me of my grandmother. She's not from Chile. She's not Latin American, but it was more like, cool, like this is why I make these films. Like to see someone kind of think about their own lives, think about their people in their lives. And I mean, mine was more of a positive, sweet story, but I think it's interesting too. I'm sure you've all had this experience to some degree, and I think that's the coolest part of it, is just for people to see themselves represented, period.
And I think you do a lot. I mean, you say that it's slower or like that, but you achieve a lot without dialogue. And I think that's the hardest thing to do. I think dialogue is great and all, but like, was that in the script, or did you let the actors kind of figure out the physicality? Is that
actually, it was in the script. There was not a lot of dialogue. It was the first thing I ever wrote. It's funny because, I mean, this is a side note, but in film school, when I started film school, I was like, I'm going to be a director. And then by the time I got into third year, it just felt like everyone wanted to be a director, and it felt so stressful to compete that I naturally kind of gravitated toward producing, because I was already doing events and stuff I don't know. So writing dialogue to me, I just was overthinking everything I wrote, that I was like, is this cringy? Is this bad? Like it went through a lot of iterations, and we actually had more dialogue. We shot like 2 other scenes that just never made the final cut.
Oh, wow.
Simply like there was a whole scene with like the abuela and the father, and kind of this confrontation of like, why doesn't she? I thought she spoke more Spanish. Like what the hell? And then it just like it just didn't make sense to have it in. It kind of was more interesting to me to just allude to bigger conversations. I think similarly in all of our films, there's a greater story there, obviously, where it's like I watched all of these films being like, I would want to know what the feature version of this. I would want to know what the larger story is. Do you guys? I'm curious to know too. Like,
you want to see a bump feature? Nobody wants to see a bump feature. That would be horrible.
Back to bump.
People have actually asked me. I'm like, what would
feature.
happen? Like, what would?
It would be a different story. It would be a bigger story.
3-minute
You gotta
movie.
dive into their backstories and see
Oh
where
my
they were
God.
on the day.
Why? There's no
There
one
seems
needs to know.
there are lots of sort of thematically between all 5 of us. There are lots of stories of like intergenerational trauma, or like parents not understanding children, or grandparents not understanding children. Like one of my favorite shots in your film Abuela is the shot of the 2 bedrooms. There's this beautiful symmetry to it, and these 2 people are so close to each other. They're sleeping in bedrooms right next to each other, but they're not understanding one another. They're not really, there's a disconnect there. And I see that a little bit in Baba, and maybe I see it a little bit in Andrea's film as well, as like just generations not understanding, or weird tensions arising between grandparents, parents, children. I'm just wondering, like, first of all, the performances in your film are beautiful. The girl who's playing, Kathy and the grandmother, like, oh, what wonderful performances. It's hard to get a performance like that.
Child
out of
actor.
I genuinely thought they were like related.
all people, like, they had never really acted. Like, sorry, they weren't ACTRA. Like, they were non-union actors. Like, we were so lucky. Finding the abuela was really difficult. Like, I was auditioning my friends' abuelas.
That's
Like,
funny.
for real. Because it's really hard to find, like, an elderly woman who is also Latina, who is
But
also
also
an actor.
but a good actor.
Speak the languages first.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And she was
yeah.
incredible, and she's from Colombia, Liliana. Funny, their names were Liliana, and the little girl's name was Eliana, so it was very confusing on set sometimes. But yeah, no, it was just a couple of, like, I think the rehearsals were key. We didn't really do too much improv on set, but I felt like the rehearsals, especially with the kid, just like being comfortable around her was like the key thing, because also she had never been on a set before, and like, is she gonna look at the camera? Like, how's she gonna feel when she gets there? Is she gonna, I don't know. So
I
it
love
all
when she's
worked out
reacting
really
to
well.
the TV.
It's a lot of reaction.
When she's reacting to the TV, like, I was just like, that feels really real.
And I think that was key part of like not having the dialogue, is to have those just reactions.
Just moments.
be
And
good.
that's very
strong.
Did you put
like,
something on the
stronger.
TV, or was she just acting? I'm just curious how you.
Oh, with the little girl.
Yeah, with the little girl when she's
When
reacting
it's
to the.
on
It was
I really like that
actually
scene.
actually me standing in front of the TV, like being silly and doing
Oh, that's
faces.
great.
So it was just
Because her
like,
smile is really genuine, and I was just like, wow, that's really good.
it was funny.
I'm curious about food and the role that food plays in both of your films? Like in
Totally different.
Andrea, in your
Also
film,
scary.
like the food is what brings the family together. It's quite an extraordinary spread. Every time I was just
Yes.
like,
I know,
this is
production
such
design.
beautiful food. And but I'm wondering, like, what does food mean for you as a filmmaker? What role does food play in bringing your characters together? Like, what are you expressing there?
Yeah, I think, yeah. For me, I have two loves. It's one's film, one is food. The other one is food. If I don't make it as a filmmaker, I want to be like a foodie, like food content creator and just like travel the world, you know?
Like Guy Fieri.
Yeah, like maybe be a chef in a past life. I don't know. But food, and oddly enough, in all of my 3 shorts, there is food. So
Yeah.
I think me as a person who loves
Yeah,
food,
it
like it's
slips
just
in.
it just slips in automatically without me thinking about it. But I think specifically like food plays such a big part in culture, and also people, it's a cliche, but they say like you are what you eat, and it's true.
Yeah.
And it's really true. But specifically in shallots and garlic, like you can tell what food represented to Indonesian culture from that prayer scene. So when they were saying like, oh, hope we become prosperous, or like hope we become like, you know, like a better person or stuff like that, that's literally all of the philosophy of the food, because it's a ritual, right? And Indonesian food has a lot of like philosophy behind it, and a lot of like myths, or like everything is purposeful. So yeah, that's kind of the role in it. And it's also my relationship to food too.
Right.
And I try to, sure, maybe in the beginning it looked appetizing, but why I didn't mind like wrecking it with all of the fight, because that was my relationship to food. Like I loved it so much, but hated it so much
Comes
at the
love-hate.
same time. Yeah, because then at that time I was like, I really want to eat you, but like, but you make me so self-conscious, and then and then my relationship with food wasn't that great, because I was like, when you start like calorie counting. But anyways, it's
right.
like,
And I noticed the calorie counting off the top of the film. There's a
that
note
was
about,
awesome.
and I found that very intriguing
font,
because
by the way.
it's communicating.
That was a good font. It's a sick font.
Yeah, but it's communicating an intention there. There's like it's like a clue. It's a clue as to what's happening in the film, and after finishing the film, you go back and you can understand what the calorie counting is all about. I'm curious, Rebeccah, food appears in your film too. How would you talk about the last scene of your film and the role that food plays in these characters' lives?
Yeah, I mean, it was a personal story, and honestly, like my memories of my abuela, who's still alive, like 93 years old. But back when I was a kid, it was the most vivid memories of her times when she would visit Canada were her cooking, like, because she loves food. Like that is her passion, is cooking. And yeah, typical like abuela, matriarch of the family, like that. Those were key memories for me, is like watching her, and it's a shame. I wish I could have been able to do exactly what was in my head.
Yeah.
It was harder to execute a food scene than I thought. My aunt ended up helping me create the empanadas, but she would have like this big mound of flour. It'd be like a volcano, and she'd put the eggs, and it was just like, that was another tricky part, is like, you know, getting an actor who can even understand like how to do the dough and all this stuff. But I digress. The role it plays is, it was a way for me and my abuela to connect. It was like, even if I didn't know how to cook, I would just like hang out, and she would just like give me something little to do, because we couldn't speak to each other, and it was all, she would still speak at me in Spanish, hoping I would understand, but
no, but I
That's
also
how it
want to
was.
add, like, in some cultures, we don't really know how to express our love to each other.
that's it
Yeah.
too.
And so, like, you do it through food. Like, you know, my mom doesn't do this, but, like, I know a lot of tiger Asian moms who, like, never say I love you, but they do it through, like, cooking you food, or, like, making your favorite meal. And that's a love language on itself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Food is...
it's pretty key. And it's so funny too, just as a side note, like, I don't know what your like experiences were on set, but I was very lucky that my aunt and my cousin and my dad and like everyone were able to be a part of it in some way or another. That yeah, like I didn't put that on the production designer. It was like, okay, like how do we how do we make these empanadas? And my aunt, like literally, if you look in the credits, it's like empanada expert, Tia Nancy.
Yeah.
Because it was like, I wouldn't know. And that's another thing that I'm kind of sad about. It's like, I freaking love cooking, but I don't know all the Chilean dishes that my abuela would cook. And I have recordings of them, but it's just such a big process that it feels like something that's been passed down. That's another thing. It's just like, it's been passed down through the generations. So it's kind of like this little piece of history that can be incorporated into my film somehow. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like part of you.
Yeah, no, I love that so
we
much.
had my aunt help out with the production design a little bit as well. Like
We
they
took
weren't on set.
half of her house and
Yeah,
being in
like
our
the
movie.
like the carpet, the like obviously Iranians have very specific carpets,
like
so we got that.
tapestry.
My uncle
yeah.
gave us like his instruments to put in the background. We took a lot of kind of like old cassettes of Iranian music to kind of put there, and then just kind of making it, just taking things from my family and just kind of making it
I watched a lot of
feel-
YouTube videos of like, oh, this is my apartment in Tehran.
That's so cute.
But
just
not-
to see, just to see how it looks.
but not
like.
making it like just adding just a little bit, because I think we obviously you can make it cliche. Like, you can make anything
Totally,
cliche. You
yeah.
can go overboard with it. But at the end of the day, I just kind of remembered what my dad's apartment looked like, and we just tried to kind of. I think I showed a couple of photos, and
Yeah.
we kind of tried to just recreate it. And
We didn't want to make it like obnoxiously cultural, if that makes sense. Because
Well, yeah, then it'd be
you
fake.
go into
Yeah.
you go into somebody's house and it's very clear the culture is there, whatever that is. But at the same time, we live in modern day,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
yeah,
The
we
clutter
kinda
was more
wanted
important.
To do
Clutter.
both.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
very clearly communicated.
You couldn't see all of
Yeah.
it though, but we got so many fucking boxes. We like destroyed the house. Like we put like beer cans, everything, and because the entire film is like tight
We
close-ups,
don't really see that.
we were like, oh my god, you like miss half of
But
it.
you know, it's
That's
still there.
part
It
of
still
it,
appears. Like I think all of
is.
that effort when you're creating a world, sometimes you pour hours and hours and hours into
You get, like, 5%.
creating, and you get like a little sliver
yeah,
of it,
it's
but
true.
it's still important that you put that work in, because if you hadn't, then who knows? Maybe the idea wouldn't be communicated even in these tighter shots. Like I think.
I had a question for you actually, because
Sure.
you do a lot of wide shots. So were you
Yeah.
very
Very
kind
long
of
white
were you very like aware of the production design and the
Oh, of course,
the
yeah.
lighting and everything?
So I was working in my parents' house for our film.
Oh, wow.
So the space was already like we didn't dress the walls or anything like that, but we liked the framing because it's a proscenium.
I was just
Yeah,
about
yeah,
to say,
yeah.
I love
It's
the
theater.
framing of the
It's
frame.
awesome.
Very
It's
cool.
theater, and I started off in theater, so a lot of my work deals with like I live with bipolar disorder. 10 years ago, I went through a lot of psychosis, which is what's being depicted in the film. And for me, the idea that I'm trying to evoke is that psychosis is very similar to theatrical production, because you're lost in a world.
Yeah.
You're talking. It's a very generative disease where you're like talking a lot. You're not really. You're in this fiction. You're in a fantasy world, which is the same for theater actors. So we wanted the set to sort of replicate the proscenium, as though she's like the whole thing is like a piece of theater that's happening. And her illness, she's becoming more and more theatrical the more and more sick she gets, which is like a sort of game that I play in most of my films, is like a person going insane, but also being playful in their insanity and playful in their
In your
illness.
last one, I love what the
Yeah.
single take that you did in
Oh,
your
yeah,
last one
that's
with the
the-
same
oh,
actress
yeah.
too.
It's the same
And I was
actress,
like,
yeah.
oh my god, it's her.
Yeah,
and
it's her, yeah.
it's interesting because is that kind of what you like? Because I can see that thematically you do like that one is a really long take, but
Yeah.
then in that one you have the shots are broken up, but they're
Yeah.
like especially that last sequence before the
Yeah.
ambulance
Yeah.
comes. How long is it?
I wouldn't be able to. I don't remember how many minutes, but yeah, it's a long
It's quite
take.
long.
Yeah.
And would you do a lot? Would you do a lot of takes?
Yeah, we did a lot of takes, and like you for your film, we rehearsed like theater. Like we rehearsed, we did a lot of rehearsing and improv. Almost all of Parlor Palm is improvised over top of script.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
so I wrote a
Improv
script.
like on set? Or during
So during
rehearsal?
rehearsal. So
Yeah.
I gave them a script, and then they improved over the script in rehearsal. And in rehearsal, we worked the material a
kinda
lot, and
mixed
they
it.
brought
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of their
yeah.
own voice. Tyson, Cody, and Sarah Swire, they brought a lot of their own voice into their performances. And then when we finally got to production, like we had rehearsed their improvised material.
Yeah.
It came through like it was very natural. Like I could see like this is just a couple.
Yeah. Were you at all inspired by like horror films at all? Because it kind of goes into that.
No, a lot of people watched it and were like, "This is a horror film."
It's like a real
and
life
and I
horror
was
film.
like, "Yeah, that's what psychosis feels."
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
Totally.
It's like you know, they when in the olden days they used to refer to like the devil taking control of your mind, you know, when they refer to psychosis. So like being possessed, you know, or being a witch. There is something very, the world of horror definitely comes through psychosis. Like it's their parallels or their hints of horror in a psychotic break. But I also wanted to depict something sort of playful and almost like comedic at times, like when she's the hoarder and she's like brought all this shit into
or
the
the
room.
plant.
You know, it's like, for me, I find it's obviously disturbing. You're like, this person needs help.
Yeah.
This person needs to get help. But a part of me is like, it's hilarious. That's because that's what some people do when they're sick. They do the weirdest things, and I find it hilarious.
Out of the context,
just out, like weird, like in their brain, it makes total sense, and to everyone else, you're like, what are you doing? But I mean, the ultimate goal with the film is to create empathy and to just try and say, this is a condition that some people live with. A lot of people who live with the condition live on the streets or are in jail or are permanently institutionalized. A lot of people take their own life if they have like chronic psychosis. So anyways, for like a big part of my practice is just like talking about this disease. Obviously my depiction of the disease is more stylized and like theatrical than the actual condition. But I care deeply about just starting conversations about insanity. That's not the word you're supposed to use anymore, but I find it very romantic. And just trying to talk about like psychosis, because most people live with this condition, like hide in their childhood bedrooms in their parents' house for years because they're so ashamed and they just want to die. So anyways, yeah,
I would say that both of your latest films that I've seen have really done a great job at depicting that and creating that empathy, because and Sarah is just such an amazing performer that like, and I think it's very clear, because she also worked on something. Was there something before this that you?
Yeah, she did Ripe, and she did A Woman's Block, and she did Acre. So I've done like 5 films.
Other pieces of your work where it's like, it's really cool, because I've obviously never done that, but to have a common actor to be able to work with them.
She's your Robert De Niro.
Yeah, literally, it's amazing to just have that. It's clear you guys have some sort of like, I don't know if the word is chemistry, but just like a really great working relationship.
Do you write for her when
I normally try to write for her. Yeah, that's what I've done. I've tried to craft roles around her skill set. Because
and is she aware that you talk about like, this is going to be a really long take? Obviously, the one that you did, that's a single take.
Parade, that we had a lot of conversations about that.
But in this one, did you tell the actors like, these are going to be really long takes?
Yeah, and it allows, I mean, I can't speak for her, maybe she finds them frustrating, but like it allows for greater theatrical performance where you can actually embody your character and you can play out a moment. Because I think a lot, like I've worked with a lot of actors who do both theater and film, and what they say about the film world is that, you know, you're doing tiny little pieces of scenes. You're doing just a close up, and sometimes you're not even performing to anyone else. And spiritually,
it's a tennis ball.
That's why pickups are so hard, I find, because you can't tap into the emotion.
You can't tap into, and this ties into Baba, because in Baba we see the actors embodying their characters. We see them really moving and dancing and
like living through.
And this is what actors don't often get to do in film.
I think it's because I was talking to an actor friend, and he's like, I love him to death. I think he's like one of the best actors like in Toronto, and he was telling me something really interesting, and he said, we were talking about that, and he said it's because actors in film and TV are so used to the close-up, they don't know how to use their bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an interesting thing that we figured out in Bump, because that's like not as long as your shot that you did in your previous one,
but it's like a long take.
But we had
There's
to.
No close-ups,
I guess we can spill it. It's not all in a one shot. There's a trick. There's a trick in there.
Spoiler.
There's a trick.
Wow.
There's 3 months of VFX in there. Yeah, I mean, like, using your body, I think, is incredibly hard, because in that one, the street almost felt like a stage, like, in a way.
Yeah.
It was really interesting, because we rehearsed that inside, like we rehearsed the lines and we rehearsed the body language inside in the apartment. We're like, okay, that kind of works. But then we went to the street to rehearse, and it played totally different.
Well, people called the cops on us when we were rehearsing.
Like,
we started fighting.
This is really
for real.
interesting, because first of all, neither of the guys performed with like real people or whatever around them. So, there's a bit of shyness. So you need to go through. But when you pass that, the physicality really brings out. Because when you're in the street, and because, you don't particularly see the camera because it was really far away and the shot was long.
Behind my car.
You really, like, if Dylan was walking away, he really needs to be walking away.
And he said that to me.
Like, wait for you.
Dylan's another non-actor that now he's become an actor, I guess. But I think he said to me, and that was the last take that we used, and he said, he's like, I'm gonna walk. I'm gonna go. You have to stop me. Like, I'm gonna walk and I'm gonna leave. Like, I'm going. He pointed to the subway. He's like, I'm going there. And I really had to bring him back. So then it evolved into me just saying like really ridiculous things.
Right.
To get him to. And he's like, what the fuck did you say, bro? And and that started to come out a little bit more. Because now I'm insulting him. He's insulting me. And then we did it to the point where he got so close into my face, and we did takes like I forgot, like some other location where like some people intervened. One guy was really wanted us to like fight. He was kind of egging, but because they weren't mic'd, we couldn't use them. But it also deviated.
But also it just kind of like it just didn't work. But the take that we used, like you said, it was last. So by that time I was like, okay guys, I think we have it or whatever. And Maz was like, no, let's just do it one more time, just like let it loose.
And that was
that was the take.
Dylan went like full Scarborough man.
Wow.
Like he went full, and he's like, I know who this guy is. Like I know how these guys talk.
Yeah.
Like I mean, we just. I think the rehearsals are really key for nailing those really long shots, because it's worrisome to have like something not work in a wide shot where you can see everything.
Right.
Like if
you're
your
more vulnerable.
hands, you got to be aware of how you move, and like.
And funny enough with Baba, it was the opposite. Because it's so close, we actually did do wide shots.
Yeah.
It just didn't work in the edit.
Yeah.
They look kind of wonky, and it's kind of the body
Yeah.
language not there. But in a close-up, you can really feel the emotion and the tension. So,
Here's a question. What advice would you guys give to younger filmmakers?
I hate this question.
Yeah, give advice to me.
I hate this question.
Like,
it's always, I always say this, like, what do you expect me to say? I'm a young filmmaker. Like, I should be...
Preach, girl.
I'm looking for advice, actually.
No, but it's like, what are you trying to... What are you
Just make films. Just make films. Just make films. Just literally go. Don't wait for a grant. Don't wait. Like our films cost nothing. Like Bump cost $200, and it got into Sundance. Like that. You don't need money to go and get into a big festival. If your goal is to get into a big festival, you don't need $60,000. You don't need $20,000. You can just go with your friends and just make something.
And
You
$20,000
sound like the No Film School.
But it really is, because like I feel like a lot of filmmakers are waiting. They're either waiting for an opportunity. They're either waiting, like I recently became friends with Ethan Ang, who made Therapy Dogs, and he made that film all on his own. Like he literally just made that film like all on his own. He edited that film.
It was last year, his high school. He just
filmed it.
Carried camera throughout, shot a bunch of stuff, made his like.
And it's a beautiful film. It's funny. It's experimental. It's interesting. It's a hybrid doc, and there's fictional elements to it. And I think that nothing really stops you from doing that. I think if you're waiting for whatever, money, grant opportunities, or something, I think that could be death. I think I think it's good to write a grant and then write something else that you could do yourself. You know what I mean? Like we really, for Bump, we just called a few people, called a few friends. For Baba, it was a 3-day shoot, and people were very accommodating to our budgets and our no budgets and things like. We recently made.
But also we're making something that's possible to make with no budget.
Yeah,
I
you
think
have to be
that's
realistic with your
that's very
means.
important to point out.
You're not doing a Western or
There's nothing wrong with having a
musical.
budget, but it's just when you don't have one, maybe don't
let it get you down.
Yeah, we have made like a big gangster movie. You know what I mean? When a gangster is being played by like a 14-year-old, like
Horrible.
not necessarily, but that's kind of the route where I'm going. So kind of be aware what you have.
Yeah.
That makes
I think
sense.
there's a balance with like, because now that like having gone through this, I think it's more like not too naive anymore, because you can say like filmmaking's fun, blah, 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 and like I can't believe it's a job, but like it's so tiring sometimes. It kills you.
Hours. Just people
also
don't even
financial
realize.
aspect.
The financial burden, and also just like the sacrifice, like
my
the
God.
price you pay, not just
Look
like
at my eyes.
yeah, not just financially,
eyes.
but like seriously, all the sacrifice you put in as a filmmaker and not knowing it's gonna pay out.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you're
In the
making like a
end-
lottery ticket and you're submitting into a lottery hoping that you're gonna win.
But how crazy is
Yeah.
it? You make a film, either you spend your own money or you get a grant. You make it, and then you have to pay to get into festivals, and it's possible it might not even play at those. Like it's a crazy thing that we do.
Yeah, and the rejection, like the
It's
amount.
horrible.
the
So why do we
amount-
do it even?
That's it.
I know.
Going back to the original
We don't get
question.
any money. We don't get any money. There's a level. I think there's a level
quitting
of
film, guys.
but there's a level of insanity. There's a level of
You
insanity
kinda
that we have to
be
deal
crazy.
with.
You have to be an insane person.
You actually
Yes.
have to be crazy because
Resilient.
it's so taxing.
Resilient, yeah, that's the word.
I remember early on, my parents were like, "Why do you want to do this? Like, what? Why? Like, you're in your room just like editing all the time, and you're not eating. You're just working on it, and it's just like I don't know. It's kind of what drives you, I guess. At the end of it, right?
And it's
But-
a roller coaster. Like I've
Emotionally.
been saying, like, you know, my highs can be really high,
Oh, yeah.
but my lows are like super fucking
Bipolar
low.
life.
Dude.
But you know what? I rather do that. I rather have that than like someone said to me, like it's actually from a Roundtable when someone's therapist says like, yeah, but that's how you know you're alive, you know, because you look at a heart monitor and
Yeah,
it goes
yeah.
up, and if it's
Right.
like if it's constant,
You don't want to be in mediocrity.
yeah, I don't want to be mediocre. I don't want to live like the
Or
white
wait.
picket fence, like steady job, steady, you know, that terrifies me more. But I guess the advice, we didn't even get to the advice.
I have one thing that I recently met like an amazing filmmaker who I love, Matt Johnson, and he said something really interesting.
I was just
He-
thinking about that.
Yeah, and he said because I love him and I really look up to him, and he said you have to make something that only one you can make, like
Yeah.
only you could have made your film.
Yeah.
In a way, and not only that, only you could have made it in the way that you made it with those over the top
yeah.
shots, like
Yeah.
all of that. Like I don't think like if you gave that script to me or anybody here, it would have been a completely different film. If
Yeah.
you were producing it, let's say, and you were the writer and one of us were the directors, it would be a completely different film. And I think when he made his first feature, The Dirties, he said something really interesting. He said like that's a film if you've seen it. It's kind of a documentary, and he said that basically it's a film about kids who are trying to make a movie, who don't know how to make a movie, and that's who they were at that time.
Yeah.
That's who him and his friends were at that time that were filming it. They were people who didn't know how to make a movie. And he said something interesting. He's like, Steven Spielberg couldn't have made that movie because he knows how to make a movie. This is and you see movies like Project X try to do that, or Chronicle try to do that. These studio movies that try to be this mockumentary kind of thing.
Totally.
And then you're like, why doesn't this work? Why does this feel kind of like a studio
It's
movie?
inauthentic.
And then you watch his, and
Yeah.
you're like, you know, he couldn't have planned the bad sound in some parts, or like the framing, or like the camera just catches something, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
wow, like this is so. Or there's like a really beautiful moment between him and his friend or something. Like, it's authentic. It's because they lived it. They lived it. They know what it is, and then they captured it on camera in that kind of filmmakery way. And they use their strengths. They're like, we don't have good lighting, we don't have good sound,
Yeah.
so let's just make this kind
Funny.
of fake documentary thing with real people in it. And that was their strength. And I think a lot of filmmakers these days are trying to be someone that they're not. It's like everyone wants to be
Totally.
Nolan, everybody wants to be Greta
Yeah.
Gerwig.
Yeah.
And those are great filmmakers. Greta's awesome, Nolan's awesome. But like, I think if you try to make something of that kind, it's you'll see that it's kind of phony by the. I mean, I've been there. I think I was in love with Scorsese and try to make those kind of films like
It's
that.
kind of
But
going back to regarding Scorsese. I think it's in Goodfellas when there is a part when we see flashbacks, I think, and Scorsese asked his own dad to shoot those scenes with like whatever homemade.
it's Raging Bull. It's
Raging Bull. Oh yeah, Raging Bull. To
With a
shoot,
Super 8.
and his cinematographer was like, "No, I can do it, but it will look different because you're a
Yeah.
cinematographer.
Yeah.
Like,
You're gonna
you
make
have
it look
an
good. You're
gonna
eye
make it look
for
good.
picture,
Yeah,
but
Using
you
my
need the
dad's
his
dad.
dad,
Yeah.
like it still looks good in a different way because of how authentic it is.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like
authenticity.
And I think
like,
that's what filmmakers need to
Yeah.
follow. Is I think good and bad are arbitrary. I really think so. I think if you make something good, great. If you make something bad, it really is. I think you have to make something authentic.
Yeah.
Well, because
That's it.
there's always going to be people that don't like your shit. There's
Exactly.
always going to be
Yeah.
people that are going to hate on your stuff
Yeah.
no matter what.
But you also
Yeah.
don't want to make a film that can be for everybody.
Yes.
yeah,
Be
you have to
niche,
make
be
it
niche.
for you,
Yeah.
and then the people that are going to relate to your stuff.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
The advice part is hard because like I would say like in the first few years, like of course, like if you're young, you're starting out, like of course you have to hustle, you have to put in fucking work. But also at the same time, like I think we were talking about this, like you also need to live like as a human being.
Yeah.
Because like that's part of like what makes you a great filmmaker. Like you experience life like
on
everybody
vacation.
else.
Yeah. Have a
also,
fight.
I would also just say like just look inwards. Like it's all there inside of you. I think that's just being true to yourself, being true to like what you're trying to say, what you want to say, because you have this voice. We have this opportunity to make something, whether it's with $200 or $60,000. You know. Yeah, I would also say like find the people that are actually like your true people, like whether that is family, friends, finding the right collaborators, you know.
Like your actor that you
one
found.
thing I think about is like you can't be a hermit in this industry. Like if you're a painter, if you're a novelist, you can live in the middle of the woods and practice your art and make amazing art. If you want to be a filmmaker, like this is what
you can't make a movie.
You can't make it by yourself.
Right,
and like part of the work I think as a filmmaker is like going to parties. Going out to screenings, going out to, like meeting people.
How much do you love that?
Like, just like put yourself out there. Like just like you cannot live in your bedroom if you want to make movies. Because it's like again, you can make your movie, but who's going to watch it if you don't know anyone, right? It's like that's like you need to be out there. You need to be
drinking.
If you're drinking, awesome. You don't need to be drinking, but like you just need to be having like an outward disposition, kind of like getting out of your apartment, getting out of your space, and like trying to like meet people. That's what I think. I don't know.
Absolutely.
But
I agree.
I'll have a producer who can do it for you.
Or have a producer.
I'm a hermit on the inside. No, actually, no, I think I'm a real hermit. I don't know. It's tough.
I think it's in waves. It's like sometimes you feel like a hermit. Sometimes you're like, okay,
the highs and lows.
Gotta get out. Yeah.
The lows is like the hermit level. And the highs is like, I'm a rock star. I'm the best.
I know.
I'm Canada's top 10.
Well, it's just so funny. I think it's another thing for me is like I wish I just celebrated the wins more. Like there's so much rejection.
Yeah,
there's so much rejection. Like we're so used to being like, oh, like I don't know if you guys have done this where it's like, oh, didn't get into TIFF this year, delete. Goodbye, I'm done with this. And I'm like sad about it for a week. And then I'm like, no, it's good. But then it's like, oh, we got into this festival, or oh, like the film's on CBC Gem. And I'm like, well, what's next? You know, like I'm saying this to myself now. I think I need to just like work on actually like being grateful for what I have.
I actually had a fight with my therapist about this because she was because she was telling me to like, Andrea, you need to start like living in the present. And I'm like, then I can't be a filmmaker. You know why? You know why? Because while I'm in like pre-production for this film, I'm still like in the past. I'm still in post with my previous film. But like whenever I'm attending a screening, everyone's like asking me, so what's your next project?
When's the feature?
And it's like I have
chill.
to constantly be thinking about the future because
you do.
Because as a filmmaker, there's just no way out of it. Like you're only as good as your last work, but 100%. you also need the next one because if people come up to you, they're not gonna help you with the project you're already done with. They
want the next one.
They want the next one. So like I was just like back and forth, and she was like, no. I was like, basically.
But also to your point, I think you also, I don't know if you guys deal with it, like imposter syndrome is like so
normal. I think it's normal. No one talks about it.
It really is normal, and I think that's why people don't really enjoy. They can't enjoy the highs. Really, it's because there's a part of you that goes, do I belong here? Like even on set, you're like, 'cause if you're either the director or the producer or something, there's a level of like being in charge, and I think that's kind of that hits me from time to time of like, okay, I have to know exactly what I want. Either if you're a producer or director or whatever, you have to know and you have to go and execute it. And there's a certain level of self-doubt. You're like, okay, maybe what I'm doing isn't right. Maybe this shot isn't exactly correct, or this performance is, or this line.
There's a lot of it, especially with like, everybody has an opinion, right? So you're not supposed to listen to everybody as a director, let's say, but
it's good to filter it.
It's good to filter it, but you need to kind of learn to do it.
And we keep a pretty open thing on our sets too. Like even the sound guy, like I think he said something on Bump, because it was really just a sound guy and a camera guy, Anya and me. And I think he said something, he was like, you guys should walk faster. And then we did, and it just became better. Because you guys walking too slow or something like that.
It's definitely a skill to understand what opinions
matter.
Like what opinions you really want to like take on as a director, and what opinions you want to just not engage with.
It's easy to just take because everyone's coming.
Yeah, everyone's coming at you.
Like, okay, we should do it like this. Actor's like, I'm gonna come in from here. And you're
a lot
like,
of decision making.
That's what I'm saying. Everybody has an opinion for the better or worse of it. You just need to learn how to filter.
I also think to that question, keep your crew small if it's your first thing.
I like to do that too.
Keep
regardless.
it small. Yeah. You don't need 100 people, especially if it's a short.
Because you just mentioned in the green room, you shot your first feature and you had like what 18, 15 people,
16. At our smallest, we were about 14, and at our largest, we were about 18. But that includes all of our like secondary characters. And,
That's really good. Yeah, I think keeping it small, especially if it's your first thing. It's not to say doing big things are bad, but I think that if the chance of success is a little bit higher when you do something like a simple story like yours. Like if you extended it, I feel like, I don't know, even us, if we extended Baba, I feel like there's more room to fail just because everyone's still kind of early, I guess, like, you know, like in the short filmmaking kind of career. And I think that like anything you try to do like as your first thing, try to keep it simple. Like simple isn't bad. And I think a lot of filmmakers like, no, I don't want to fuck simple.
Because you're keeping majority of the control.
I'm gonna shoot with 2 cameras. I'm gonna have this.
Yeah.
And, you're like,
and people like to socialize. Like when the crew swells to like over 25 or 30, it's like people aren't as focused. I don't know. No. It's just like,
and I love to socialize. And I love to socialize so much that we went over time by like minutes, and I love it so much. And I'm so grateful that we got to have this time all together. This is really nice. Like I knew you before this, but this was like our first time meeting.
Yeah.
Countdown.
Yeah, it feels like we can keep going.
Yeah, I know. I was just like
3
hours. I know. I was like, Eric, where are you?
He's under the table.
He's over there. No, I think there was so much. I feel like we could keep talking about. This is like a whole series. I think you could keep talking about film stuff forever.
The whole series.
Oh my god.
Is it 4 o'clock?
It's 9 more minutes to 4.
I screwed you up on like 10 more minutes.
When is your meeting? 4 o'clock.
In 9 minutes.
Is it for work?
Is it far?
Is it for work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, shit. That's it.
So
Did I say all the things right? Sorry, I wasn't sure. Thank you so much,
Mom,
everyone, for
Dad.
joining us. Are you listening?
Pick us up.
You can catch us here tomorrow.
You did a really great job. That was
we
all suck. We all suck.
They should hire you.
Yeah, Rebecca host the show.
That was so natural. That was so natural. Like that was killer.
Holy
yeah.
Like how you integrated.
I thought we
everything.
were just gonna be like reading this.
Wait, hold on. Let's take a photo.
Oh yeah.
I know when our like little fits. Come on.
Matt, come closer.